Okay guys, let's start up the video. And now his story. This video is going to be, I think the name is Her Story, and this is the boy version. This is one of the fastest uploading video YouTube channel ever. So let's go into it, and let's go popular this time. Popular. And I thought this was the popular. Oh no. 78 million! Oh my gosh! He is a monster of this uploading, bro. Now, though.
My twin brother Chris and I were 9 when we learned Morse code. We tapped messages under the dinner table when Mom told us to stop talking, and tapped through the wall between our bedrooms every night. When Chris got into a car accident and the doctor said he'd never wake up, I pulled up a chair next to his bed, took his hand, and tapped. "Are you there?" Nothing. But I came back the next afternoon and tapped again. Before I left, I always said the same thing. "See you tomorrow, Chris." A week later, Chris's fingers twitched against mine, and I almost fell out of my chair. I grabbed a nurse and she barely looked up. They're reflexes. It doesn't mean anything. I bought a notebook the next day and started writing down every single one. 4 months in, Mom watched me scribbling and said, "How long are you gonna keep doing this? Until he taps back." He's not gonna tap back. You're talking to a corpse. Dad lasted a few more months before he pulled me into the hallway. "We need to talk about donating your brother's organs. His fingers move every time I hold his hand, Dad. The nurses said those are reflexes. Stop getting your hopes up, son. I don't care what the nurses say. You're not donating my brother's organs." But a week later, my parents called to have Chris transferred to a long-term facility to die, and scheduled a meeting to sign the papers. The afternoon before the meeting, I tapped into his palm like always, but this time, something tapped back. Short, short, short. Long, long, long. Short, short, short. SOS. I grabbed his hand. "Chris, if that's you, squeeze once." He squeezed so hard my knuckles cracked. I stormed into the meeting room and told them my brother just responded to me. The caseworker said, "This is very common with families who aren't ready to let go." My parents nodded. I grabbed the transfer papers off the table. "You're not signing anything until you come see for yourself." I walked them to Chris's bed and grabbed his hand.
Wait.
"Ask him anything." The caseworker asked what year it was. Chris squeezed out the answer. Count to 5. 5 perfect squeezes. His mother's name, tapped out letter by letter. By the 10th question, she said, "He's still alive. We can't move him." Weeks later, I asked Chris what kept him fighting when everyone gave up. Heard Mom call me a corpse. Heard Dad say donate my organs. Heard all of them leave, except you. I asked why. I wanted to see you too. My twin brother Chris and I were 9 when we learned. The flight attendant slipped me a napkin that said, "The pilot isn't who he says he is. Meet me in the back to talk." I knew she chose to tell me because of the military dog tags around my neck. I folded the napkin and slid it into my pocket, and that's when the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Hopkins, expecting smooth skies to Chicago." But something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. I waited 2 minutes and casually walked to the back, not knowing what to expect. The flight attendant was there with a man holding up a police badge. The man whispered, "I'm glad you're here. I'm an undercover cop." I knew something was wrong straight away. The flight attendant whispered, "I've flown with Captain Hopkins for 6 years. I don't exactly know what's wrong, but I know that's not Hopkins, and we're flying the wrong way." She showed me the flight map of where we were heading. The plane is heading toward an abandoned airport. I leaned over the map. My body was pumping with adrenaline because it was the perfect place to crash a plane. There's an empty space above the pilot's room. I can climb up and listen to what the pilot and co-pilot are planning through the ceiling. Take my number. If you can tell there's something fishy going on, text me one word. Now. That's the signal to move. And to distract everyone while I climbed above the ceiling, the flight attendant made an announcement on the speakers to tell everyone to keep their seatbelts on. Through the cracks, I could hear 2 men in the pilot's room talking. 15 years ago today, our brother died because of Captain Hopkins. Now we get to crash his plane with him tied up on it while we impersonate him. I texted the undercover cop. Now, the cart slammed into the pilot's room door, and the cop kicked it open. I dropped through the ceiling and tackled the fake pilot out of his seat. The cop pinned the co-pilot to the floor. The flight attendant grabbed the radio. "Mayday, our pilot is gone. We need help landing right now." She looked at me. "Find Hopkins, the actual pilot. He has to be on this plane somewhere." I sprinted to the back of the plane, checking every door. I yanked open the closet next to the bathrooms, and Captain Hopkins was inside with his hands tied and tape across his mouth. I ripped the tape off. "Get me to the controls." He ran to the front and dropped into the pilot's chair. He grabbed the wheel. "Tower, this is the real Captain Hopkins. I'm landing this plane." When we finally landed, the cops dragged the brothers off in handcuffs. The flight attendant came up to me in the aisle. I pulled the napkin out of my pocket and held it up. "You saved 200 lives with this." She smiled and took it back. The flight attendant slipped me a napkin. My daughter came home crying with an F because her teacher doesn't know what color blood is. The first time I realized something was wrong, Riley came home from school holding out her arm. Look, Dad, you can see the blue blood in my veins right here. She traced the blue lines under her skin with her finger. I put down my coffee and looked at her. Actually, sweetheart, that's not true. Blood is always red because of hemoglobin. It's just darker red in your veins. Her face scrunched up. But Mrs. Miller showed us a whole PowerPoint about it. She even had diagrams from a science book. The next morning, I packed my work scrubs in my bag. I'm an ER nurse at Mercy General, and I was working the afternoon shift anyway. I sent Mrs. Miller an email asking if I could do a quick presentation about blood for career day that afternoon. She loved the idea. When I arrived, Mrs. Miller introduced me as Riley's dad, who works at the hospital. 28 kids stared up at me from their desks. I heard you guys learned that blood is blue inside your body, I said. The entire class nodded enthusiastically. Mrs. Miller beamed from her desk in the corner. I pulled out a blood collection tube from my pocket and held it up. This is what we use to draw blood at the hospital. Notice something. The tube creates a vacuum. No oxygen inside at all. I paused. When we draw blood with these, it never touches oxygen until we pop the cap off. I showed them photos on my phone of sealed blood tubes. See? Still red. Mrs. Miller's smile started fading. She shifted in her chair and cleared her throat. A boy raised his hand and pointed to their science textbook. But our textbook says it's blue. I picked up the book and checked the publication date, 1998. Medicine updates pretty fast. We used to think lots of things that turned out to be wrong. Mrs. Miller suddenly stood up from her desk, her hands gripping the edge. Well, thank you for that interesting presentation, Mr. Johnson, but we need to move on to math now. I nodded and started packing when a girl in the back raised her hand. So our textbook is wrong? The class erupted in whispers. Mrs. Miller's jaw clenched and her voice got tight. The curriculum says, actually, I interrupted, pulling up the state science standards on my phone. I walked over and turned my phone toward her. The current curriculum specifically mentions this myth as something to correct. She stared at the screen and her eyes narrowed. Her mouth pressed into a thin line and her nostrils flared. Can I speak with you in the hallway? The kids watched as we walked out and the door closed behind us. Do you have any idea how hard it is when parents undermine my authority? Her face was red and her voice was sharp. Now they'll question everything I say. I kept my voice calm. Isn't that exactly what we want them to do? Question things and learn critical thinking? She crossed her arms tightly. I've been teaching for 22 years. I'm not changing my whole curriculum because some nurse thinks he knows better than our textbooks. The next day, I found out Mrs. Miller gave the class a pop quiz. Riley came home crying, her face red and puffy. Her hands were shaking as she handed me a paper with a big red F on it. I took a deep breath and felt my jaw tighten as I looked at the question. What color is blood inside the body? Riley had written red, and Mrs. Miller had marked it wrong. I requested a meeting with Principal Davis and brought printouts of medical textbooks, the state science standards, and Riley's quiz. The principal called in Mrs. Miller and asked her directly, is blood blue inside the body? After a long pause, Mrs. Miller said, it's what the children understand better. I leaned forward in my chair. My daughter is crying every morning before school because she's afraid of getting F's for writing down the truth. The next day, the school replaced their science books. Now whenever Riley learns something new at school, she comes home and asks me, Dad, is this actually true or is it just a Mrs. Miller truth? My daughter came home crying with an F because her teacher doesn't know what color blood is. The first time I realized, every time we heard a knock on the front door, my dad would yell, stealth mode, and we had 30 seconds to kill every light in the house. My brother and I would race through the rooms, flipping switches, yanking cords, shutting off the TV mid-show, while some guy outside banged on the front door yelling, I know you're in there, buddy. Dad timed us. Once everything was dark, no talking, no moving, no looking out the windows. We'd sit there until Dad did his owl hoot, which meant all clear. Sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes almost an hour. Afterwards, he'd high-five us and go, real ninjas couldn't do better. He told us stealth mode was top secret. Never tell your teachers, your friends, nobody. Other people wouldn't understand. For years, I believed him. When I was 8, I asked Dad why we had to hide so much. He said some annoying guy kept bothering our family, and stealth mode was how we dealt with him. I felt proud we had a secret skill that could outsmart bad guys. By the time I was 10, I heard the voice outside yell something about a bet and $20. I tugged Dad's sleeve and whispered, is the bad guy trying to steal our money? Dad shushed me so hard I flinched. When I was 12, I broke the window rule, peeked through the blinds, and saw a completely normal guy in a polo shirt standing on the porch rubbing his forehead. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like someone's tired uncle. At 13, I told Dad I was just going to open the door and tell the guy to leave us alone. The color left his face. You absolutely cannot do that. That was the first time stealth mode didn't feel like a game. By 15 or 16, it barely happened anymore. But when it did, Dad would peek through the blinds looking guilty. Mom just shook her head from the couch and muttered something under her breath. I was 17 and home alone when I heard heard it. I know you're in there. It's been 12 years, man. I opened the front door. The guy nearly fell backwards. Normal-looking dude, middle-aged, holding a crumpled piece of paper. Oh, hi. Is your dad home? I'm his old college roommate. He held up the paper. Your old man bet me $20 Michael Jordan wouldn't win his 6th ring. That was 1998. I've been knocking on this door ever since. He handed me the IOU, both their signatures, right there at the bottom. I left it on the kitchen table. Mom saw it first and laughed so hard she had to hold the counter. Dad picked it up, read it, put it back down, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "So now he knows someone's home." Then he turned off the kitchen light and got under the table. We were never in danger. My dad just lost a bet because of the greatest of all time.
Huh?
Every time we heard... A man climbed onto our school bus with a knife, and the first thing he heard was a slow clap from the back row. Confused, he screamed at our driver, Mrs. Worley, to keep driving and not stop for anyone. A kid leaned forward. "Nice ski mask. Did you cut the holes out yourself, or did your mommy help you?" The whole bus laughed. He waved the knife around. "Shut up and no one gets hurt. Your hand is shaking so hard I can't tell if that's a threat or a dance move." He stepped toward the kid who said it, and 20 voices started talking at once. "Oh, he's walking now. Everybody watch out." He spun around trying to find who said what, but insults were coming from every direction. Bro seriously hijacked a bus with no plan, no getaway car, and a Walmart knife. This is the saddest crime I've ever seen. We wouldn't let him finish a single sentence. "Are you robbing us for money? All I have is an EBT card and a bus pass." He pointed his knife at Mrs. Worley, and the whole bus went silent. A kid stood up. "You can threaten us all you want, but if you point that thing at Mrs. Worley again, we're gonna have a real different conversation." He laughed nervously and asked what a bunch of kids were going to do about it. A girl said, "We're on the bus to the school for troubled teens. Half of us are here for assault, and the other half won't say why." Mrs. Worley looked at him over her shoulder. "Honey, I've watched these kids make grown men cry over smaller things than pointing a knife at me." He lowered the knife. "Smart choice. She brings us donuts on Fridays. We protect what matters." His face twisted, and he shoved toward the kid with the knife raised. Mrs. Worley pulled over, stood up, and stepped between them. "That's enough now." He grabbed her arm and shoved her into the dashboard. For half a second, the bus was completely silent. Then a kid came over the seats like something feral, and 3 others were right behind him. The guy didn't have time to turn around before someone hit him in the back of the knees and he went down. The knife skittered under the seats, and kids were on top of him before he could reach for it. Someone had him in a headlock while someone else pinned his arms. A girl sat on his legs and went through his pockets just to add insult to injury. Mrs. Worley pressed the emergency button. "I need police at my location. Tell them there's no rush. The situation is handled." The guy was crying. "Please get off me. I can't breathe." A kid leaned close to his face. "You should have thought about that before you touched Mrs. Worley." When the cops showed up, they found him tied to a seat with shoelaces and snot running down his face. A man climbed onto our school bus with a knife, and the first thing he heard was a slow clap from the back row. Confused, he screamed at our driver, Mrs. Worley, to keep driving and not stop for anyone. A kid leaned forward. "Nice ski mask. Did you cut the holes out yourself, or did your mommy help you?" The whole bus laughed. He waved the knife around. "Shut up and no one gets hurt. Your hand is shaking